Thank you so much, everyone. So we have with us tonight Israeli ambassador to Nigeria, Ambassador Michael Freeman, to shed light on the recent development in the Israel-Hamas conflict. Ambassador, thank you so much for joining us tonight on the program.
Thank you, Sean, for having me here.
Thank you so much. Indeed, of course, you heard the minister of in the Hamas government in Gaza. He made some very strong statements regarding the ongoing conflict. How does Israel respond to those kind of heavy allegations against your country?
Well, firstly, I must say I'm a little bit surprised and a little bit disappointed that you had on somebody from Hamas on the TV program. This is Hamas, who are a terror organization who carried out the largest massacre of Jewish people on October the 7th since the Holocaust. You know, I wouldn't expect you to have a representative of Boko Haram here. I wouldn't expect you to have a representative of ISWAP here. So I was really surprised that you would have a leader of a terror organization here in your studio justifying, and he did justify, the massacre and the murder, the butchering, the rape, the torture, the burning of children, the murdering of babies on October the 7th. 1,300 Israelis were butchered, raped, murdered, tortured, children tortured in front of their parents, parents tortured in front of their children, people burnt alive, and 260 hostages taken into Gaza. And here was a man saying that, yeah, that's absolutely fine. And I was stunned to hear that.
I mean, it's interesting that there are philosophical differences between how Israel and some part of the West perceive Hamas, an organization that is somewhat institutionalized itself in that region, and they perhaps have accused Israel of painting them black and not allowing them to have their own freedom. And this was one of the accusations leveled by Hamas, yesterday been echoed by Ahmad yesterday on this program, who says, look, all of these atrocities being perpetrated by, allegedly perpetrated by Israel and being supported by some part of their allies across the globe, is to bring down Gaza and Palestine and subjugate them and occupy their territory. How do you respond to those kind of allegations?
Look, the man, unfortunately, is a liar. A man who is willing to murder babies in their bed, a man who is willing to kidnap a 1-year-old child and a 4-year-old child, an 86-year-old man, and take them into Gaza, a man who is willing to condone the torture and rape of citizens, is also a man who's willing to lie. And we should look at some of the facts here. It's not me who defines Hamas as a terrorist organization only. Israel does, America does, the European Union does, other states around the world do. And I think that we can all agree that when you come into Israel, when you break across a fence, a border fence, and you take children out of their bed in the middle of the night and you murder them, when you go to a music festival and there are young people, 19, 20, 21 years old, partying at a music festival, and you murder them in cold blood, 350 of them, that's terrorism. If that's not terrorism, then nothing's terrorism. It was quite clear that this is what Hamas were doing. Hamas have openly stated that their aim is the total destruction of the state of Israel and the death of every single Jew around the world. That's in their constitution. Again, not my words, their words. But this is who we're dealing with and who Hamas are. And Israel, like any other country in the world, after they carried out these brutal, vicious terror attacks on October 7th, we made it clear that we would respond, that we would go into Gaza in order to make sure that Hamas could never carry out these terror attacks again, and that we could bring back our hostages. They are still holding 134 hostages, 134 men, women, and children. A 1-year-old baby who has spent nearly half his life in captivity in Hamas. 4-year-old Kfir Bibas, who has also spent his time in captivity. This is outrageous, it's unjustifiable, and we will do whatever we need to return our hostages and to make sure that Hamas can never, ever carry out these evil terror attacks again.
Are there still Palestinians being held hostage in Israel at the moment?
Inside Israeli prisons are terrorists, and there are other criminals that are there. You know, when people carry out terror attacks, if I send a suicide bomber into Israel and I send someone to carry out a terror attack and I'm arrested, I get tried, I stay in a court of law, and then I get put in prison for carrying out a terror attack or for carrying out an attempted terror attack or attempted murder. So yes, there are people inside Israeli prisons, Palestinians, who have carried out terror attacks and are there for that reason.
It's interesting that similar allegations that you raised about Hamas and some Palestinians is what Ahmad also raised yesterday, saying himself, his mother, his own father, he served about 5 years in an Israeli prison for no just reason. And there are those who think that how can Israel also defend some of the activity that they say has been an occupation of years upon years of their territory? Is Israel really willing to leave them alone and give them their freedom?
So maybe we should look at some facts. Firstly, yesterday, the Hamas terror representative said that Israel has been occupying them for 76 years. Israel was founded 75 and a half years ago. So that tells you everything you need to know about what the Hamas organization believe. They believe Israel has no right to exist and should never be there. But let's look at some facts. In the year 2000, Israel offered a peace treaty to the Palestinians, withdrawing from the West Bank, from the Gaza Strip, division of Jerusalem, an independent Palestinian state. Bill Clinton, then American president, said it was an amazing offer. The Palestinians rejected it. In 2008, Ehud Olmert, then Prime Minister, made an even more generous offer with even more of the 98% of the Palestinian territories. Again, the Palestinians rejected it. In 2005, Israel left the Gaza Strip. Remember, on the 6th of October, there was not a single Israeli soldier, not a single Israeli inside the Gaza Strip. We left in 2005. We offered the Palestinians the opportunity to build an amazing place. In fact, the Hamas leadership said, we had the opportunity to build Singapore. We chose not to build Singapore because we want to destroy Israel and we want to attack Israel. Well, look at what's happened. All of the billions of dollars that's been provided by international aid, where's it gone? It's gone into building tunnels. It's gone into making the Hamas leadership rich. Look at the Hamas leaders currently sitting in Qatar. They're worth $3 billion, $4 billion, $5 billion. They've stolen the money, they've stolen the futures of Palestinians, and they've put that money and their futures in their pockets. There are 700 kilometers of underground tunnels inside Gaza that Hamas have built. 700 kilometers. That's nearly twice the length of the London Underground. And that tunnel system is not used to protect the people. It's not used to bring along trains or transport. It's used for the terrorists to hide. It's used for them to store their rockets, for them to store their ammunition and to fire rockets and fire terror attacks onto Israel. That's what Hamas has done. Hamas has sold the future of the Palestinian people. And the end of Hamas will bring peace closer and will be better not only for Israelis, but will also be better for the Palestinians. If you look on the Instagram groups and on the various other social media groups and the Telegram groups, you will see now that more and more Gazans are speaking there about the disaster that Hamas have caused them, that Hamas have brought untold misery and untold disaster onto everything, because Hamas have built a military system that hides behind the civilians. They're not interested in hospitals. They're not interested in schools. They use the hospitals. They use the hospitals to hold our hostages. They use the hospitals to hide their ammunition and to hide their rockets. They use the schools as storerooms. The headquarters of UNRWA, the UN aid agency, underneath was the major data center for Hamas. So they've turned the entire place into a Hamas terror headquarters.
Ambassador Freeman, are you worried? Is Israel as a nation worried about the casualties? I mean, most of which are children, innocent civilians who are on the receiving side in the shellings and in the attack on Gaza, which has caused untold hardship on the people there. Are you worried as a nation about that?
So I would say to you, not only am I worried as a nation, I'm worried as a person. Firstly, I would say we need to be very careful about accepting the figures that are coming out of the casualties. The figures are provided by Hamas, and we've already established that Hamas are willing to lie. Yesterday, your guest said they never targeted children and they never targeted women or innocents, which is a complete lie. 50% of the people who were killed were children and innocents on there, were children and women. Sorry, everybody was innocent on the 7th of October. But so I would definitely make sure that we don't necessarily listen to all of their figures. But I've no doubt that many innocents are dying and many innocents are suffering inside Gaza. And it's a tragedy. How could any human being not be moved by the death of an innocent? But you need to ask who's to blame for that. And the people who are to blame are Hamas. You know, this war could end tomorrow. If Hamas release all of our hostages and surrender unconditionally and say, that's it, we surrender, the leadership surrenders, we will leave. We've got no interest in being in Gaza.
The similar thing that Hamad said yesterday, he says that if Israel agreed to a swap of prisoners, that they are ready to...
Well, that's also not true. But firstly, what's Hamas saying? Hamas is saying they will release a 1-year-old baby that they kidnapped from their bed if I release a terrorist that killed 50 people. That, to me, and they don't want one terrorist. For the 1-year-old baby, they want 10 or 20 or 50 or 500 or 1,000 terrorists so they can bring them back into Gaza, rebuild their terror network, and kill Israelis yet again. Because Hamas's fundamental belief is that we must all die. They're not interested in any solution that apart from the death of every single Israeli. So again, understand what Hamas wants. Hamas wants us all dead. So we will do what we need to do to make sure that Hamas can never do it again.
So Israel will not release those prisoners in Israel. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying to you that when we talk about releasing prisoners and getting back hostages, one is a hostage that's been innocently taken. If I said to you, you can have back, many years ago when the Chibok girls were taken and were kidnapped, you can have back the Chibok girls if you release all of the Boko Haram terrorists that are currently in your prisons. People would say, that's not a trade. That you can't compare innocent girls that you kidnapped from a school to terrorists who are sitting in a prison. And that's what we're being asked to do there. So I'm not saying we won't release, but everybody needs to understand what we're being asked to do here. And releasing our hostages doesn't end the war. Releasing our hostages is one of the two conditions. The other condition is that Hamas can never carry out another October the 7th terror attack, and they can never terrorize Israel and never terrorize the Palestinian people.
How do you hope to do that?
Well, at the moment, we're doing it militarily because Hamas are not willing to surrender. You know, I would say to anybody who's saying to us, well, you know, what you're doing is not good. I would say to you, what's the alternative? To allow Hamas to rebuild, to do it again? On your program yesterday, the Hamas terror representative that you had said very clearly he's not ashamed of October the 7th. He thinks it was great. And he said that if he was given the chance, he'd do it again, and that he's not willing for Israel to exist. He said that himself. When that's what Hamas are saying, what are we meant to do? Say, okay, kill us again, we're willing? No country would allow them to rebuild.
So an Israeli anywhere in the world is under threat as long as a Hamas group is in existence.
Not only an Israeli, also Jews. We've seen that there are plots against Jewish communities, there are plots against other people around the world. Every Jew, every Israeli and the state of Israel are at severe threat as long as Hamas exists.
So it's not only within the region. You think that globally there is a threat on every Jewish person and every Israeli. That's what you think.
We know. We saw that in Denmark, it was published that they arrested a group of Hamas terrorists who were planning on carrying out a terror attack. We saw that it was published that in another number of countries that Hamas terrorists were arrested planning out terror attacks. So we know that this has happened. We've seen that Iran, who is one of Hamas's major backers, we've seen what they've done with Hezbollah in Lebanon. We've seen what they've done with the Houthis in Yemen. We've seen what they're doing in Iraq. Iran is backing and carrying out terror attacks around. We've seen that they carried out a terror attack in Argentina years ago, where they blew up the Israeli embassy. They blew up the Jewish community center. They have no qualms. These are people who want to destroy Israelis and Jews wherever they were and want to kill us.
So you imagine that Iran is suspect in all of this and is a major backer. That is the thinking of the Israeli nation.
Well, it's not only their thinking, it's been evidenced and it's been proven that Iran are a major backer of Hamas financially, training, and they've been involved. We know that they are openly backing Hezbollah, they are backing the Houthis in Yemen, they are backing terror groups in Syria. They're openly admitting to that. There's no...
What would you say that it could be the implication of the escalation of this kind of violence that we're seeing? Because we know that the Prime Minister Netanyahu, there are possibilities and the feelers that Rafah, there might be movement into Rafah if there is a possibility, and there might be possibility that that region might be more engulfed with the military operations by the Israel nation. What do you think globally could be the implication of these activities?
Look, we're going to operate in Rafah in order to get rid of the 4 battalions of Hamas terrorists that are still there. And we also believe that our hostages are held there. We also believe that the Hamas leadership is there. And so we will need to operate in Rafah, but we also need to know that we need to make sure that the innocent civilians there are not harmed. And we do everything we possibly can to make sure that the innocent civilians are as safe and can possibly be in the war zone that is there. In terms of the implications, look, I think we're all seeing that Iran is working to destabilize the entire Middle East. That's what they're about. That's what they do. And I think that...
For what purpose?
Well, because they believe in a radical extremist ideology that believes in spreading their hate and believes in spreading their warped form of ideology across the region, and therefore that's what they're working for. That's what they're doing. We've seen them exporting terror across the region, across the world, and they are a danger not only to Israel but to the rest of the world. As we know, these threats often start with Israel, but they very, very rarely end with Israel.
Going forward, in all of this, because Ahmad said yesterday, what could be a dangle for truce will be an exchange or a swap of prisoners. But you said that's not the only reason. How much of, how distant do you see these whole thing being resolved? Because you're saying that the only time you think this war can be over is when you see the end of their Hamas terrorists, when they are incapable of causing havoc or causing any attack on Israel.
Absolutely. Look, we hope that's going to be soon. Prime Minister Netanyahu said recently that he believes that we are making significant progress in the battle, and that soon, and again, I can't tell you an exact time frame, it depends on the military, but we have a military that is doing everything they can to avoid civilian casualties, that is doing everything they possibly can to uproot Hamas. And I hope that soon we will be able to take out the remainder of those battalions, that we will be able to take out the leadership of Hamas, and that we will be able to embark on a better pathway for both Israelis and Palestinians. My war is not with Palestinians. I'm a father of 2 young children. And I know that the future is built on the fact that for my young children, they will have a better future. That means that the Palestinians also need a better future. And the only way that's going to happen is if we work together and Hamas aren't in the picture.
Well, is it possible also that, that Israel is able to make a promise of allowing Palestine to have some kind of freedom that they're asking for? They said that this has been majorly an occupation on their territory. Is Israel able to make that commitment to leave them alone and let them live their lives?
Well, more than that, as I said to you, in 2000, we made an offer for an independent Palestinian state. They rejected it. In 2008, we made an offer for an independent Palestinian state on the West Bank and in Gaza and a division of Jerusalem. They rejected it. In 2005, we left Gaza. Let's be clear here, that on the 6th of October, there was not a single Israeli soldier inside Gaza. There wasn't a single Israeli citizen inside Gaza. There was none. We left. We gave them the opportunity to build a new reality.
Your allies have been drawn into this conversation, and the accusation about how the United States also condoned Israel to, in quote and unquote, the words of Hamas yesterday, terrorized their own people and subjugated them, occupied their land. Are you having more allies? For example, what kind of conversation are you having with a country like Nigeria that is also split? The Nigerian people are split between the beliefs and the philosophy of Palestine and Israel. What kind of conversation are you officially and unofficially?
We have conversations with all our friends. We also have conversations with people that aren't our friends. Where fortunately Nigeria is a very good friend of Israel. We have fantastic relations between our 2 countries. And I think the Nigerians understand what terrorism is. You know, unfortunately, Nigeria has been affected by Boko Haram, by ISWAP, by all of these radical terror organizations. And therefore, I know that Nigeria understands terrorism. And when we're having conversations, obviously I'm not going to expose conversations that are had in detail. But we talk with all of our allies, we talk with all of our friends, we listen to their concerns, we listen to their worries, and we also appreciate their understanding that tackling terrorism and tackling extremism such as Hamas is critical, it's important, and every country has the right to defend itself, especially after the vicious murder, terror, butchering and rape that Hamas carried out on October 7th.
What's your response hearing that Ahmad says that they're having conversation with top Nigerian government officials?
Well, again, I would say to you that that Hamas tend to lie on all sorts of different issues. Hamas are an organization that is a terror organization, and I would take any single thing that a representative of the terror organization.
So you don't believe that they have a conversation?
Anything they say, I would say to you, you should be very, very careful about anything they say. And if you listen carefully to what he said yesterday, he said he hopes to be having conversations, not that he's having conversations. And I think that that's an important distinction. And I know that again, with Hamas, Hamas are trying everything they can to talk to anybody and everybody. But everybody here understands, and everybody around the world understands, that Hamas is a brutal, evil terror organization. And I will tell you that it's important that we remember also the 134 hostages. Yesterday, Agam Goldstein, who is 17 years old, and she was a young Israeli who was held as a hostage by Hamas. And she was released. And she was describing on television yesterday what the current hostages are going through. And she gave the story of one hostage who was being who told her the story that one of her Hamas captors, one of her Hamas terror captors, put a gun against her head, stripped her naked, and I'm not going to go into the details on television, but sexually and physically abused her whilst holding a gun against her head. So we have to remember there are 134 hostages being held by Hamas who are being sexually and physically abused every moment. And I think that it's important that the world calls for their immediate release. So
you would say that Nigerian government should not be talking to Hamas. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. I would say to you that there is no government that should be talking to Hamas. No one should be talking to any terror organization. And I'm confident that the Nigerian government isn't talking to Hamas unless it's to tell them to release the hostages. Hamas is not a government. Hamas is a radical terror organization whose entire aim is to destroy the state of Israel and murder every single Jew around the world.
Ambassador Freeman, are you one of those Nigerian allies who left Nigeria in the cold when Nigeria needed help to fight terrorists on our soil? And how would you defend, how much of help did you give to Nigeria militarily and in terms of intelligence?
So I'm not going to discuss on television what we do and don't do in details, or certainly in the security realm. It would be inappropriate for me as an ambassador to tell you what we did. What I can tell you is that Israel and Nigeria are friends. Israel and Nigeria are allies. Israel and Nigeria understand the common threat of security, of radical Islamist terror organizations, of radical terror organizations, and we cooperate and work together wherever we can, and our hand is always open to work with our allies, to help them and to work with them and to coordinate and to learn from each other on what we can do to tackle terrorism.
All right. Just before we close this conversation, what would you be saying as your final thought tonight to the rest of the world, to people who are watching right now in Gaza, those who are watching in Israel and in all parts of the world, about the possibility of peace returning to the region? Just in about 30 seconds, if you may.
We didn't want this war. This was a war that was thrust upon us by Hamas on the 7th of October. We want our hostages back, 134 hostages, we want them back. We want the end of Hamas so they can never carry this out again. Our enemies are Hamas, not the Palestinian people. We are living in the same region as the Palestinian people. We know that they will be our neighbors, and we want a better future. I'm a father of 2 young children, and I have to hope that we will have a better future for me, for my children, and for the Palestinians.
Ambassador Michael Freeman is Israeli ambassador to Nigeria. Thank you so much indeed for your thoughts tonight. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much. Thank you.